They called her just another homeless woman, but no one knew she was silently sacrificing everything to keep her children alive. By the time the truth was revealed, an entire city was left in tears. The winter wind swept through the crowded streets long before sunrise, carrying with it the sounds of rushing traffic and hurried footsteps. People wrapped themselves in warm coats, clutching hot cups of coffee as they hurried toward work, barely noticing the woman sitting quietly on the corner of the sidewalk. To most passers-by, she was simply another homeless person, someone whose story had already been judged without a single word being spoken. Her faded coat, worn-out shoes, and tired eyes painted a picture that everyone believed they understood. Yet behind that fragile appearance was a mother carrying a burden heavier than anyone could imagine. Maria sat silently with an old blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Beside her rested a small backpack that held everything she owned. There were no expensive belongings, no valuables, only a few carefully folded clothes, a weathered family photograph, and a small notebook she never allowed out of her sight. Every few minutes she looked toward the photograph, gently brushing away the dust with her fingertips before placing it safely back inside the bag. It was the one reminder that kept her heart beating through the darkest days. People walked past without slowing down. Some avoided making eye contact altogether. Others whispered to each other before continuing on their way. A few tossed loose coins into the paper cup in front of her without even looking at her face. Maria accepted every coin with a quiet smile and a grateful nod, never asking for more than what people willingly offered. She had long stopped expecting kindness from strangers, but she never stopped believing that kindness still existed somewhere in the world. As the morning slowly turned into afternoon, she counted the handful of coins she had collected. It wasn't much, but her expression softened as though she had received a fortune. Instead of searching for food or something warm to drink, she carefully placed the coins into a small cloth pouch and stood up. Every step she took was slow and painful, yet there was determination in the way she walked. Her body was exhausted, but her heart refused to give up. She entered a small grocery store where the cashier recognized her immediately. Many customers glanced in her direction with uncomfortable expressions, expecting her to buy the cheapest snack available. Instead, Maria carefully selected a loaf of fresh bread, a carton of milk, several apples, a packet of rice, and a bottle of children's vitamins. She checked the price of each item several times before placing it into her basket, making sure every coin was spent wisely. The cashier looked at her with concern. "You should buy something for yourself," he said gently. "You look like you haven't eaten." Maria smiled softly. "I'm all right. But you need food too." "I'll be fine." There was no hesitation in her voice. She truly believed it. To her, someone else's hunger mattered more than her own. After paying for the groceries, Maria left the store carrying 2 heavy bags. The weight strained her arms, but she never complained. She walked several miles across the city, taking side streets and quiet paths until she reached a peaceful neighborhood filled with modest family homes. She stopped across the street from a small blue house and hid behind a large oak tree where she couldn't easily be seen. She waited patiently. Moments later, the front door opened, and an elderly woman stepped outside. Maria quietly placed the grocery bags on the porch before slipping back behind the tree. A few seconds later, the elderly woman noticed them. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. 2 children rushed outside. "Grandma, look, more groceries." The little girl smiled brightly. "I wonder who keeps bringing them." The older boy looked around the neighborhood but saw no one. "Maybe it's an angel," the little girl said with innocent hope. Maria covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Hearing those words warmed her heart more than any blanket ever could. She watched from a distance as the children carried the food inside, laughing together without knowing that their own mother had spent another day hungry just to make sure they never went to bed that way. She waited until the front door closed before quietly turning around and disappearing into the fading afternoon, carrying nothing with her except an empty grocery bag, aching feet, and the silent comfort of knowing that, for one more day, the people she loved most would have enough to eat. As the sun began to set, the city transformed into a sea of glowing lights, busy intersections, and people hurrying home after another long day. Maria returned to the same quiet corner where she spent most of her evenings. The temperature had dropped sharply, and the cold breeze cut through her thin coat, making her shiver. She pulled the worn fabric tighter around herself and sat down on the cracked pavement, trying to ignore the aching pain in her body. To everyone passing by, she looked like someone who had lost everything. What they couldn't see was that every hardship she endured was part of a choice she had made out of love. A young businessman stopped briefly in front of her and dropped a few coins into her paper cup without saying a word. His phone rang immediately, and he walked away before Maria could even thank him. Moments later, a group of teenagers laughed as they passed, making jokes about homeless people. Maria lowered her eyes and remained silent. She had heard those words countless times before. At first, they had hurt deeply, but over the years she learned that people often judged what they saw without wondering what had happened before that moment. When the streets finally became quieter, Maria opened her backpack and carefully removed the old notebook she protected so fiercely. Its cover was faded, and several pages were beginning to fall apart, yet she treated it like the most valuable treasure in the world. Inside were handwritten notes, small reminders, grocery lists, birthdays, school schedules, and dozens of letters she had written but never mailed. She slowly turned to one particular page. "My dear Ethan and Lily, I hope you're both eating well. I hope you're smiling. I hope you're sleeping peacefully every night. One day you'll understand why I couldn't stay beside you. Please don't think I stopped loving you. Every decision I make is because I love you more than my own life." A tear slipped down her cheek before landing softly on the page. She gently wiped it away and closed the notebook before anyone walking past could notice. The truth was something she had never shared with anyone. Years ago, Maria had been a respected nurse at one of the city's busiest hospitals. She loved helping people, and her compassion made her one of the most trusted members of the staff. Patients remembered her kindness long after they recovered. She never imagined that one day she would become the one needing help. Her husband, Daniel, owned a small repair shop. Together, they worked hard to provide a comfortable life for their 2 children. They didn't have great wealth, but their home was filled with laughter, birthday celebrations, bedtime stories, and dreams for the future. Every evening they gathered around the dinner table, sharing simple meals while talking about school, work, and the little adventures of everyday life. Then everything changed when Daniel collapsed one afternoon while working. Doctors delivered devastating news. He had a rare illness that required expensive treatment. Maria refused to give up. She sold their second car. Then their savings disappeared. Soon their furniture was sold piece by piece. She accepted extra hospital shifts, sometimes working 16 hours without rest before returning home to care for Daniel through the night. Sleep became a luxury she could no longer afford. Despite all her efforts, the medical bills continued to grow. Friends helped when they could. Neighbors organized small fundraisers. Coworkers donated money. Still, it wasn't enough. The family was forced to sell their home and move into a tiny apartment. Maria never complained. She believed that as long as they were together, they could survive anything. But Daniel's condition continued to worsen. One rainy evening, he held Maria's trembling hand inside the hospital room. "You've already sacrificed too much," he whispered. Maria shook her head through tears. "I would sacrifice everything if it meant keeping you with us." Daniel smiled weakly. "If anything happens to me, promise me you'll protect Ethan and Lily." She squeezed his hand tightly. "I promise." Only hours later, the machines fell silent. That promise became the center of Maria's entire life. After Daniel's passing, the debts remained. Collection notices arrived almost every week. Interest continued to grow, and every paycheck disappeared before she could even touch it. The emotional pain became almost unbearable, but Maria focused only on her children. Then another tragedy struck. The hospital where she worked announced major staff reductions because of financial difficulties. Many experienced employees lost their jobs, including Maria. Overnight, her steady income vanished. She searched desperately for another nursing position, but months passed without success. Employers wanted recent experience, additional certifications, or positions that had already been filled. Bills piled higher, rent went unpaid, and eviction became unavoidable. With nowhere left to go, Maria faced the hardest decision of her life. Her elderly mother offered to care for Ethan and Lily until Maria could rebuild their future. It shattered Maria's heart, but she knew the children needed stability, a roof over their heads, warm meals, and the chance to continue school without fear. She kissed both of them while they slept on their final night together. "I'll come back for you," she whispered softly, "no matter how long it takes." From that day forward, Maria chose a life that no mother would ever want for herself. She stayed close enough to watch over her children from a distance, working temporary jobs whenever possible, collecting bottles, cleaning stores after closing time, and surviving on almost nothing. Every dollar she earned was quietly transformed into groceries, medicine, school supplies, or anything her children might need, while the painful truth remained hidden behind the face of a woman the world believed had simply lost her way. Years passed, and life settled into a quiet routine inside the small blue house where Ethan, Lily, and their grandmother lived. Although their grandmother did everything she could to provide love and stability, there was always an empty space in the home that no one could fill. Family photographs still hung on the walls, and among them was a smiling picture of Maria, taken years before life had turned upside down. Every time Lily looked at it, she would smile softly and ask the same question. "Grandma, when is Mom coming home?" Their grandmother would gently stroke her hair and reply with the same hopeful words. "One day, sweetheart. Sometimes life takes people on difficult journeys, but love always finds its way back." Lily accepted the answer because she was still too young to understand. Ethan, however, was no longer a child. At 16, he had begun noticing the small mysteries that everyone else overlooked. He watched the way his grandmother carefully managed every expense, stretching every dollar to make sure they had enough food until the end of the month. Yet somehow, just when the kitchen cupboards were nearly empty, fresh groceries would appear on the front porch. It happened every single week. Bread, milk, rice, fresh vegetables, fruit, sometimes medicine for Lily when she caught a cold, sometimes notebooks and pencils just before school started. There was never a note, never a name, only neatly packed grocery bags waiting outside the front door. At first, Ethan assumed it was one of the neighbors, but after months of wondering, he began asking around. Mrs. Parker from across the street shook her head. "I wish I knew. Whoever it is has a very kind heart." The local mail carrier smiled. "I've delivered mail here for years, but I've never seen anyone leave those bags." Even the neighborhood shop owner had no answers. "I've noticed someone buying groceries in cash almost every week, but they always wear a hood and leave quickly." The mystery stayed locked away. One evening during dinner, Ethan looked at the groceries on the table before speaking. "Grandma, do you know who's been helping us all this time?" She paused for a moment before answering. "I truly don't." "Then why hasn't anyone tried to find out?" She sighed. "Maybe whoever they are doesn't want recognition." "But why?" "Sometimes the purest kindness expects nothing in return." Those words stayed with Ethan long after everyone had gone to bed. He couldn't stop thinking about the unknown person who cared enough to help strangers week after week without ever revealing themselves. Whoever they were had spent years making sure his family never went completely without food. He wanted to thank them. The next Saturday, Ethan made a decision. Instead of spending the afternoon with his friends, he quietly sat beside the living room window where he had a clear view of the front porch. Hours passed slowly. Cars came and went. Children rode bicycles along the street. Neighbors mowed their lawns. Nothing happened. The afternoon faded into evening. Lily wandered into the room. "What are you doing?" "I'm waiting." "For what?" "For our mystery visitor." She giggled. "You really think you'll catch them?" "I hope so." As darkness slowly settled over the neighborhood, Ethan nearly gave up. Then he noticed movement. Across the street, an elderly-looking woman wearing an oversized coat carefully walked toward the house carrying 2 grocery bags. Her head remained lowered beneath a faded hood. She looked around nervously before quietly placing the bags beside the front door. Instead of knocking, she immediately turned away. Ethan's heart raced. This is it. He rushed outside before the woman could disappear. "Excuse me." The woman froze. She didn't turn around. "Please wait." She tightened her grip on the empty grocery bag in her hand. Ethan walked closer. "You've been helping us, haven't you?" Still no answer. "I just want to say thank you." The woman slowly began walking again. Ethan followed. "You don't have to leave." She stopped once more. Something about her posture felt strangely familiar. The way she slightly leaned on one leg. The gentle movement of her hands. Even the way she paused before taking another step. His voice softened. "Please." Very slowly, the woman turned around. The hood slipped back just enough for the fading sunlight to illuminate her face. Time seemed to stop. Her cheeks looked thinner than he remembered. Small wrinkles surrounded tired eyes that carried years of silent pain. But those eyes. He knew those eyes. He had seen them every day in the family photograph, hanging on the living room wall. His breathing became uneven. His lips trembled. "No." The grocery bag slipped from the woman's hands, and apples rolled across the sidewalk. Tears filled her eyes. She looked at him with a mixture of love, fear, and heartbreak. "Ethan." Hearing his name spoken in that voice sent a wave of memories rushing through him. Bedtime stories, birthday hugs, lullabies, warm smiles, a mother's gentle laugh. His knees nearly gave way. "Mom." Maria nodded slowly, unable to speak through the tears. For a brief moment, neither of them moved. Years of unanswered questions stood silently between them. Maria looked down, ashamed of her appearance. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted you to see me like this." Ethan stared at her worn clothes, her tired face, and the hands that had clearly worked far beyond their limits. His mind struggled to understand what he was seeing. "We thought you left." Maria closed her eyes. "I know. Why didn't you come back?" Her voice broke. "Because I couldn't bear the thought of bringing you into the life I was living. You could have told us. I wanted you to remember me as your mother, not as someone sleeping on the streets." Ethan felt anger, confusion, sadness, and love all at once. "You've been the one bringing us food." Maria nodded. "I couldn't give you everything. So I gave you whatever I could. The groceries, the medicine, the school supplies. It was all you. Every week. Every single week. I promised your father that I would always protect both of you." My promise didn't end when I lost my home. Tears streamed down Ethan's face. He looked at her trembling hands. Hands that had once bandaged his scraped knees. Hands that now carried the marks of years of hardship. You were hungry, so we could eat. Maria smiled faintly. It was worth it. You worked all this time. Cleaning restaurants. Washing dishes. Collecting bottles. Anything that helped. And you never came inside. I stood across the street almost every week. I watched you grow. I celebrated your birthdays from a distance. I cried when you graduated middle school. I smiled every time I heard Lily laughing in the yard. I was always close. You just couldn't see me. Ethan could no longer hold back his emotions. All those years, he had believed his mother had abandoned them. Now he realized she had never truly left. She had been sacrificing her comfort, her dignity, and every piece of happiness she still possessed simply to keep her children safe, fed, and hopeful, while carrying the unbearable pain of loving them from only a few steps away without ever allowing herself the comfort of calling out their names. For several long moments, neither Maria nor Ethan spoke. The evening air had grown colder, yet neither of them noticed. The world around them continued as usual. Cars drove by, children laughed in nearby yards, and neighbors returned home after work, completely unaware that a family separated by years of heartbreak had just found each other again. Maria lowered her eyes, unable to bear the shame she felt. She tried to wipe away her tears with the sleeve of her old coat. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "I never wanted your memories of me to look like this." Ethan stepped closer. "Look like what?" She glanced down at her worn shoes. "A homeless woman." He shook his head slowly. "I don't see a homeless woman." Maria looked at him in confusion. "I see my mother." The words shattered the wall Maria had built around her heart for years. She covered her face with trembling hands as quiet sobs escaped her lips. She had imagined this moment countless times, always fearing rejection. She had convinced herself that her children would be ashamed of her, that they would blame her for disappearing, or worse, refuse to accept her. Instead, her son stood in front of her with tears in his eyes and nothing but love in his heart. Without another word, Ethan stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. Maria froze. For years she had dreamed of hugging her children again, but she had never believed that dream would become reality. Slowly she embraced him. Both of them cried openly. Years of pain, loneliness, guilt, and unanswered questions seemed to pour out in silent tears. Across the street, the front door of the blue house opened. Lily stepped outside, carrying a small watering can for the flowers near the porch. She noticed Ethan standing on the sidewalk hugging someone. Curious, she walked a little closer. "Ethan." Neither of them heard her. She continued walking. When she reached the sidewalk, Maria slowly turned toward the familiar voice. The little girl stopped. She stared at the woman standing beside her brother. Her eyes moved from Maria's tired face to the family resemblance she had only seen in old photographs. She whispered almost inaudibly, "Mom." Maria's legs nearly gave out beneath her. She dropped to her knees. "Lily." The little girl hesitated for only a second before running straight into her mother's arms. Maria held both of her children tightly, unable to stop crying. "I missed you so much," she whispered. "So much." Lily buried her face against Maria's shoulder. "Why didn't you come home?" Maria closed her eyes. "I wanted to. Every single day. But I couldn't give you the life you deserved." Lily looked up. "I didn't want a different life. I wanted you." At that moment, their grandmother stepped outside after noticing everyone gathered near the sidewalk. When she saw Maria, tears immediately filled her eyes. She slowly walked toward her daughter. For years she had respected Maria's painful decision, even though it broke her heart to watch from a distance. Without saying a word, she gently placed her hand on Maria's shoulder. "My child." Maria looked up. "I'm sorry, Mom." Her mother shook her head. "You kept your promise." Maria looked confused. "I watched everything. I knew." Maria blinked in surprise. "You knew? I saw you leaving groceries. I saw you watching the children from across the street. I wanted to tell them many times, but I knew why you stayed silent." Maria stared at her mother in disbelief. "You never hated me." Her mother smiled through tears. "Never. I was proud of you every single day." The family embraced once again, as years of separation finally began to disappear. None of them noticed a young woman standing across the street, holding a camera. Her name was Rebecca. She worked as a local journalist and had been covering a community event nearby when she happened to witness the emotional reunion. At first she lowered her camera, believing the family's privacy should be respected. But as she listened from a respectful distance and slowly understood what had happened, she realized this wasn't simply another reunion. It was a story about sacrifice, about unconditional love, about a mother who had chosen suffering so her children could have hope. Rebecca quietly approached after the family had calmed down. "I'm sorry to interrupt." Everyone turned toward her. "My name is Rebecca. I'm a reporter." Maria immediately looked uncomfortable. "I don't want attention." Rebecca nodded respectfully. "I understand. But I think people need to hear stories like yours." Maria shook her head. "I'm nobody." Rebecca smiled gently. "No. You're exactly the kind of person the world needs to remember." After several minutes of conversation, Maria reluctantly agreed to share only a small part of her story, hoping it might encourage others never to judge someone by their appearance. Rebecca promised to tell the story with honesty and dignity. The interview was simple. No dramatic music. No exaggerated questions. Only Maria quietly explaining how every decision she had made came from one place: love. A few days later, the story aired on the local news station. At first, only a handful of people watched it. Then someone shared it online. Within hours, thousands of people had seen it. By the next morning, the video had spread across social media. Millions of viewers from around the country watched in disbelief. Many admitted they had cried while listening to Maria describe the nights she had gone without food so her children could eat. Parents hugged their children more tightly after watching. Teachers showed the story in classrooms while discussing compassion. Community groups organized conversations about homelessness and hidden struggles. The comments poured in faster than anyone expected. "I judged homeless people without knowing their stories. This reminded me to treat everyone with kindness. My mother sacrificed everything for me too. I'll never look at another person the same way again." The response reached far beyond simple words. People wanted to help. A local restaurant owner offered Maria a full-time position managing the kitchen staff. A clothing store donated warm winter coats. A dentist volunteered free treatment after noticing the condition of her teeth. Several organizations offered temporary housing. Volunteers collected furniture for a future apartment. Former coworkers from the hospital recognized Maria during the interview. One nurse immediately remembered the countless patients Maria had comforted years earlier. Another recalled how she always stayed late to help anyone in need. Even former patients contacted the station. One elderly man said Maria had stayed beside his wife throughout her final night in the hospital because no family members could arrive in time. Another family shared that Maria had once spent her lunch break comforting their frightened child before surgery. Every news story painted the same picture. Long before becoming homeless, Maria had spent her life caring for others. Now strangers wanted the chance to care for her, not because they pitied her circumstances, but because they finally understood the extraordinary strength, humility, and love hidden behind the face of a woman so many people had once passed without a second glance, proving that one honest story has the power to awaken compassion in hearts that had forgotten how deeply another person's quiet sacrifice could truly matter. The overwhelming response to Maria's story reached places she never imagined. Every morning, new letters arrived at the community center where volunteers had arranged temporary assistance for her family. Some were written by children who had watched the interview with their parents. Others came from elderly people who said they had experienced hardship themselves decades earlier. Many simply thanked Maria for reminding them that true strength often hides behind silent suffering. One afternoon, Rebecca arrived with a small box filled with handwritten letters. "I thought you should read these," she said with a smile. Maria hesitated. "Are you sure?" Rebecca nodded. "They're for you." Maria slowly opened the first envelope. It read, "Dear Maria, I used to walk past homeless people without even looking at them. After hearing your story, I realized every person has a life I know nothing about. Thank you for changing my heart." She picked up another. "My mother raised me alone. She skipped meals so I could eat, but I never understood her sacrifices until today." Another letter simply said, "You reminded me that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear old coats and carry grocery bags." By the time Maria reached the last letter, tears had blurred the words on the page. "I never wanted to become an inspiration," she whispered. Rebecca smiled. "You didn't try to become one. You simply loved your family." News of Maria's story eventually reached the hospital where she had once worked. The hospital administrator, Mr. Harrison, watched the interview late one evening after a colleague insisted he see it. As Maria appeared on the screen, he leaned closer. "I know her," he said quietly. The director of nursing nodded. "She worked here years ago." "I remember. One of the finest nurses we've ever had." Mr. Harrison immediately requested Maria's employment records. Everything he found confirmed what he already believed. Outstanding patient feedback. Excellent performance reviews. Recommendations filled with praise for her compassion, professionalism, and dedication. The following morning, he made a phone call. When Maria answered, she sounded nervous. "Hello, Maria." "Yes. My name is Thomas Harrison. I work at Riverside Hospital." There was a brief silence. "We would like to invite you to meet with us." Maria hesitated. "I haven't worked as a nurse in years." "We know. But kindness doesn't disappear with time." A week later, Maria walked through the familiar hospital entrance. The same doors. The same hallway. The same scent of disinfectant she remembered so well. Only this time, she entered with uncertainty instead of confidence. Several former coworkers immediately recognized her. One by one, they walked over. "I can't believe it's really you. We've missed you. You always made this place better." Maria smiled through happy tears. "I've missed all of you too." Her interview felt more like a family reunion than a job application. Instead of focusing only on the years she had been away, they focused on the years she had devoted to caring for others. At the end of the meeting, Mr. Harrison stood up and extended his hand. "We would be honored to welcome you back." Maria stared at him. "You mean?" The position is yours." She covered her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. "Thank you." "No," he replied. "Thank you for reminding all of us what this profession truly means." Within a few weeks, Maria began working again. The first day she put on her nursing uniform, she paused in front of the mirror. For years, she had only seen herself as someone who had failed. Now she saw the woman she had once been. Strong, compassionate, determined. She gently touched the name badge pinned to her uniform before whispering, "I'm coming back." Her first patient was an elderly woman recovering from surgery. Maria greeted her with the same warm smile she had always carried. The patient smiled back. "You have kind eyes." Maria laughed softly. "I've been told that before." Outside the hospital, life also began to change. With support from the community, Maria and her family moved into a small but comfortable apartment. It wasn't luxurious. The furniture didn't match. The kitchen was tiny. The walls were plain. But none of that mattered. For the first time in years, they were living together under one roof. The first evening in their new home felt almost unreal. Lily carefully arranged family photographs on a small shelf. Ethan assembled the dining table, while joking that he had probably tightened the screws too much. Their grandmother quietly prepared dinner in the little kitchen, smiling every few minutes as she listened to her family laughing together again. When everything was finally ready, they gathered around the table. The meal was simple: fresh soup, warm bread, roasted vegetables. Nothing expensive, nothing extraordinary. Yet to Maria, it felt like the richest feast she had ever seen. For several moments, no one spoke. They simply looked at one another, grateful that the years of separation were finally over. Lily broke the silence. "Mom." Maria looked up. "Yes, sweetheart. Promise me something." "What is it?" "If life ever becomes hard again." Maria reached across the table and held her daughter's hand. "We'll face it together. No more carrying everything by yourself." Maria smiled. "I promise." Ethan nodded. "We're a family. And families don't let one person fight alone." Their grandmother raised her glass of water. "To second chances." Everyone smiled and gently clinked their glasses together. Months passed. Maria settled into her work, and Ethan graduated from high school with excellent grades. Inspired by everything he had witnessed, he decided to study social work so he could help families facing difficult circumstances. Lily continued to excel in school and often volunteered at community shelters on weekends, greeting every visitor with warmth instead of judgment. One Saturday afternoon, Maria and her children walked through the same downtown street where she had once sat alone with her paper cup. The familiar sidewalk looked different now. Not because the city had changed, because she had. As they walked, Maria noticed an elderly homeless man sitting quietly near a bus stop. People passed him just as they had once passed her. Without saying a word, she stopped. She knelt beside him. "Have you eaten today?" The man slowly shook his head. Maria smiled gently. "Wait here." She and her children walked into a nearby grocery store together. A few minutes later, they returned carrying fresh food, warm clothing, bottled water, and a blanket. The man looked at them with disbelief. "You don't even know me." Maria handed him the bag. "I don't have to. You deserve kindness anyway." The man lowered his head as tears filled his eyes. "Thank you." As the family continued walking, Lily slipped her hand into her mother's. "You knew exactly what he needed." Maria looked back at the man, smiling as he opened the bag. I remembered what it felt like when someone treated me like I still mattered. The sun slowly disappeared beyond the buildings, painting the evening sky with soft shades of gold and orange. Maria looked at her children walking beside her, laughing together, and realized that everything she had sacrificed had led to this moment. She had lost her house, her comfort, her career for a time, and nearly her hope, but she had never lost the love that guided every decision she made. That love had carried her through every cold night, every empty stomach, every lonely tear, and every painful goodbye until it finally brought her family back together. She understood that life would never be perfect. Challenges would still come, and difficult days would still exist. But this time, they would face them as a family, standing beside one another instead of suffering alone. Their greatest treasure had never been a house, a bank account, or material success. It had always been the unbreakable bond they refused to let hardship destroy. And as they disappeared into the crowd, they no longer looked like people defined by the pain of their past. They looked like a family defined by love, resilience, forgiveness, and hope, proving that even the darkest seasons of life can lead to the brightest new beginnings when hearts choose compassion over judgment and love over despair. Moral: never judge someone by their appearance or circumstances. Every person is fighting a battle you cannot see, and the greatest acts of love are often the ones performed in complete silence. True wealth is not measured by what we own, but by the sacrifices we make and the kindness we choose to show others. Disclaimer: this story is a fictional work created for inspirational and entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to actual people, events, or places is purely coincidental. The purpose of this video is to spread awareness about compassion, family, and the power of selfless love. Please treat everyone with kindness, because you never know what battles they may be facing.